Hey guys, I'm back with a review of episode 3 of season 2 of The Last of Us, directed by Peter Hoare and taking place 3 months after the events of the attack on Jackson and the death of Joel. If you haven't seen the last couple episodes, including this one, get away, spoiler warning for anyone who doesn't know. This is a very somber episode, but also a hint of what's to come in the future for the rest of the season. This is more or less an expansion of a certain section of The Last of Us Part 2 video game, where if you played it, you know how this goes. Ellie is dealing with the loss of Joel. Given the constraints of the video game medium, there's not really a whole lot of time that's given to focus on the aftermath of Joel's death, where the town not only voices the heartbreak of who they lost in the attack, but also losing Joel, who meant a great deal to the community of Jackson. Segueing into the opening of the episode, where Tommy is cleaning up the body of his dead brother. Even though we don't see his face, since his face is covered up by a blanket, we see his hand sticking out from underneath the blanket with the watch that Sarah gave him many years ago. And when Tommy says, "Give Sarah my love," oh man, I'm already getting emotional just thinking about that. Along with Ellie waking up in the hospital, screaming out in agony, still seeing the image of Joel on the ground, getting stabbed to death by Abby. Something that the series will carry on from the video game, given that Ellie has a recurring nightmare or a flashback of Joel lying on the ground, along with the shame and guilt that she feels over not being able to get to him in time. 3 months later, the community of Jackson is rebuilding the wall where they had the breach. Ellie finally gets discharged from the hospital, but not before she gets a one-on-one session with Gail, played by Catherine O'Hara, who checks to make sure that she's okay after what she experienced, and Ellie puts on a very confident bravado type of front, but Gail can see right through a bluff, having been a psychotherapist for so many years. I do like the inclusion of Gail, since she's a completely original character for this adaptation, voicing the other side of the argument on whether or not people can be saved, as she has a talk with Tommy about whether or not he should encourage Ellie to go off to Seattle. There's some conflict that he's experiencing. He feels a responsibility to the town of Jackson, given that Ellie was Joel's pseudo-daughter, therefore Tommy's pseudo-niece. Kind of jumping around on this one, but with Gail saying that some people just can't be saved, given how fiery and passionate and go she was, she almost was a perfect match for Joel right from the beginning. They both did really horrible things, or they were at least willing to do horrible things to protect the other. And now that he's gone, like I said in my last episode review, the mad dog's about to be let off the leash. But the scene where she goes to Joel's house and is looking around at all of his belongings that are left behind, even seeing his jacket, and she gets a whiff of his jacket, like the smell of him, and she literally starts to break down. That's a common trauma response that I've been able to experience. Now, I've only had to put my dog to sleep. That was about 8.5 years ago. And whenever I pass by the area that he would sleep in, it's almost like his spirit is still there. I'll admit, I still hear him, like, going woof, literally sends me into a flashback mode. And I lost a good friend of mine a couple years ago unexpectedly due to an aneurysm she experienced. And whenever I see the same type of car that she would drive, I literally wait for the car to get close enough to see if she's still there. And I've seen a couple of people driving those things where they look very similar to her at a distance. It's almost like, at least the impression I get anyway, is that her spirit's still kind of hovering around, checking in on me once in a while. But then Dina comes in and gives Ellie some information that she's been holding back for some time while Ellie was in the hospital. Ellie is obviously upset over this, but we all know, and Dina vocalizes this, that had she told her the information that she knew about Abby and her gang, Ellie would have crawled right out of the hospital, pulling all the tubes out of her body, and fought tooth and nail to get to Seattle. Dina was very smart and calculating and had a plan thought out. This is a big change in the game, because Dina was there when Joel died in the show, as opposed to the game where it was Tommy. So Dina has more of an incentive to go with Ellie on this revenge mission. And when Ellie was estranged from Joel, Dina kind of took her place, and Joel would use her as a way to check in on Ellie to see if she was okay. In the game, I always felt like she kind of went out of obligation. I mean, she obviously had a romantic connection with Ellie, so she went there to support her. But in the show, I think it's handled better, not just because of the romantic attraction that's starting to blossom. She knows how much Joel meant to the town of Jackson and to Ellie, and how much she meant to her, Dina. And with the advice from Jesse, Ellie writes down on a piece of paper her reasons to want to go out to Seattle, not just with her and Dina, but with a posse, so to speak. She tries to talk with Tommy about it, but he's not really having it, so Jesse suggests bringing it up to the council of Jackson, where everybody's voice is going to get heard, including Seth, who is still not viewed favorably by Ellie, and he's not exactly a saint either. I mean, he literally threw out a slur towards Ellie and Dina. Drunks never tell a lie. I mean, if anything, really. I know from experience, not that I ever drank, I've been around a few drunk people to know when the truth slips out by accident, but that's neither here nor there. It is somewhat jarring to see Seth speaking out about Joel like that, because Joel literally threw him to the ground in defense of Ellie. I guess help comes from the most unexpected places, and not to get on my soapbox, but human beings are complicated. We're fickle, we're messy, we switch from one side to the other, we have a light and dark side inside of us. But as Sirius Black told Harry Potter, what matters the most are the parts that we choose to act on. And I could be reading too much into this. Maybe in a future episode they could explore this. But I think maybe Seth is having some regret over what happened with Joel the day after he had that confrontation with him, and seeing how much it's affecting Ellie. Maybe he also feels guilty for what he said to her that night. He even helps him sneak out of the town in the middle of the night, and Ellie is not too crazy about that. She reluctantly shakes his hand. It's like she comes to an understanding even if she still doesn't like him very much. Big improvement over the character in the game, because he was basically a one-and-done character who is not meant to be that well regarded. So Ellie gives her speech in front of the council, and it looks like that Maria might actually vote no, but I think it's pretty clear that she did vote yes, because she sees how prepared Ellie was. And Jesse tells Ellie, don't write angry, because the council will vote no for angry. And it's not really a close margin. 8-3 vote against Ellie's wishes. And while Ellie says that it's not about revenge, it's about justice, or whatever exactly she says, Gale, as a psychotherapist, knows that that's all a bunch of bull. But even with her plea towards the council, there is nothing in the world that's going to stop Ellie from doing what she wants. And Dina proves to be a good yin to her yang. She has a plan where Ellie just wants to go all in, flying by the seat of her pants. Dina brings in a map, elicits supplies, telling her, okay, go this amount of miles on this day, take a break in between this time, which again is more of a good reason as to why Dina wants to come along. So they end up heading out towards Seattle, but not before they stop by Joel's grave outside of Jackson. So far, this is probably the most gut-wrenching scene in the entire series. Just seeing Ellie kneel down before his grave and dropping down coffee beans, something that he was really big about, drinking coffee. And in the game, Ellie says, and apologize for the use of the word, that she never liked it, that it tastes like burnt shit. I would agree with that, because Coffee and I have never been best friends. But even then, she did it for him. He was basically her father for all intents and purposes, and it was a way for her to show some kind of connection to him wherever he might be in the great beyond. And certainly the thought of him reuniting with Sarah in the afterlife, whew. Imagine if they show something like that. I don't think that The Last of Us will ever go in that direction, but if they ever did, oh boy, that would hit in the feels really hard. So they make their way to Seattle, and then we get to see a glimpse of the Seraphites, or the Scars, and they're at a civil war with the WLF, the Washington Liberation Front, which is what Abby and her friends are a part of. To go back to the conversation between Tommy and Ellie about going to Seattle, I can't remember exactly how it went down in the show, but it does echo what Tommy says to her in the game when she's dead set on going to Seattle.
I'm leaving tomorrow. And if you want to come with me, great.
You have no idea what you're walking into. You don't know how large that group is, how armed.
I don't care.
And given that Dina also has knowledge of the WLF from Eugene, Gale's husband, who had a confrontation with them, she and Ellie assume maybe the group isn't that big and there's nothing to worry about. No. If that final shot is any indication, it is not going to be easy. But to go to that Seraphite group, or the Scars as they call it, since they have the scars across their mouth, the Glasgow smile, like Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight, it's a very familiar image of what we saw with Joel and Ellie, and it's an extension of those themes about what you're willing to do to protect those you love in this world. This young child is just asking innocent questions about the war or the prophet that they follow, and you see hints of that throughout the second game, like a spray painting on a wall where you see a picture of this woman who looks like she's Native American or whatever. I'm willing to bet the show's going to dive a little bit deeper in that area. That's something I wish we got more time with in the game. We see them when a certain character goes off to find somebody, and we get a really good look at the WLF. But I felt like there was something missing by not giving enough focus to that group. I understand that maybe in a video game it would have been a little too long to focus on that, whereas the show, I think you have a really unique opportunity to go into certain areas that the game even couldn't go into. And the kid finally gets a hammer and she's excited, but then as they communicate through whistles, and let me tell you, those whistles definitely brought flashbacks as I was trying to navigate certain areas while playing the game. They realize that wolves, or the WLF, are closing in on their position, and they take cover. And then Ellie and Dina later find their bodies as they're making their way into the city, seeing the dead child on the ground. But it does add to the fear of the WLF that maybe this group isn't exactly as small as they thought, because who would literally go out of their way to harm an innocent child, let alone kill them? You'd have to be a very ruthless person to do that. Another thing I really like about this episode is that we see the continuing blossoming of the bond between Ellie and Dina, as opposed to the game where they jump into the relationship very quickly. Dina's obviously still thinking about the kiss that they shared together during the New Year's Eve party, and there's a few moments whenever Dina's around, Ellie's heart skips a beat or two. Dina has a similar effect when she sees Ellie. She asks her how she would rate their kiss, and that it's actually a 5 out of 10 or 6 out of 10 or whatever she says, and actually Dina wasn't that high that night. clearly there's something there. I don't mind the change. I personally like the idea of slowly building towards that culmination of a romantic connection. And Isabella Merced, I'm hopefully saying that correctly. I apologize if I didn't get it right. I was initially hesitant about her because I'm so used to Shannon Woodward, who is the original actress in the game. She's quite good here. She has the feel of the character, even if she doesn't look exactly like Dina. Like with a lot of other actors in the show, it's all about the feeling and spirit of the character. That to me is what matters the most. But the final few minutes, they arrive in Seattle and they notice that there's not much happening. They see the remains of downtown with the Space Needle in the distance, and they think, okay, maybe it's not as bad as we thought.
Everybody's moving to Seattle. It's the pesto of cities. So?
But we see that one guy, Manny, who was part of the group that Abby was leading, is in a lookout tower, looking out in the distance for any trespassers. In the game, we don't see it, but I think it's safe to assume that they had some kind of people watching over the place, over the abandoned areas that they weren't covering. And then we see the final shot of the WLF marching down the street with a Humvee and a tank, fully armed and prepared. I mean, to think about it, this episode gradually goes from a somber feeling to an eerie, ominous warning, with Ellie mourning the loss of Joel, then going on a revenge mission, having no idea what she's about to encounter in Seattle. Those are my thoughts on episode 3. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this episode. I'm really looking forward to seeing how they continue on in the next few episodes, and as always, see you in the next one.